I stand before a legislative body asking you to keep the basic human rights of childbearing women and girls in place. Leave the law as it remains today. Direct all of your focus on why we were called back to this State House: to provide needed economic relief to residents who are struggling to meet their basic needs, while state government sits on an embarrassment of riches of your tax dollars. A tax refund that, as the author stated, was best left to individuals to decide how to spend. This is a powerful moment for women in this state. We are standing up for our rights, rights we never thought we would lose, which were once guaranteed by an interpretation of the Constitution and were only stripped away due to a new interpretation of that same Constitution. You may not have thought that these women would show up, that maybe that we weren't paying attention to what this body is doing. But people in the state of Indiana are getting involved in politics as if their futures depended on it. I have seen rallies in my community of South Bend and Mishawaka, places like Elkhart, Goshen, Osceola, LaPorte. Women and girls, brothers and husbands standing by their wives, fathers speaking up for their daughters. From every corner of this state, people are demanding that their voices be heard by this legislature, to demand equal rights under the law, to have the same control over their body that is guaranteed to any man in Indiana. A new generation of women, arm in arm with their mothers, their grandmothers, generation who fought for this protection under the law so many years ago. And they're still fighting with us to remain free from government overreach. Now, I recognize that I am standing before a body that refers to a citizen with a gun as Mr. and Mrs. Lawful, but a citizen with a uterus as not to be trusted, whose mistrust of women is revealed in the policies proposed here today in Senate Bill 1, who believe that women will lie about being raped just to get an abortion. We are told by the Republican supermajority that you cannot legislate moral behavior when it comes to issues like gun violence in America, but in a matter of 2 weeks, we will legislate away a woman's God-given free will to make her own decisions, add more government mandates to regulate her behavior. A legislature that claims to have protected girls' sports while at the same time refuses to protect young girls from their rapists. An amendment introduced by Republican leadership and supported by the majority of Republican members to remove the exception for rape and incest, turning a blind eye to sexual abuse and misconduct that occurs in this state by the very adults that young girls were told that they could trust. This body will deny the religious freedoms to our neighbor while demanding that we write the laws according to your religious book. Choosing only to recognize religious freedom when it serves your mission. Exposing a belief that you truly believe your religion is more important than anyone else's and thereby should be law of the land. That is un-American. Imposing your own personal belief in survivors exposes the inherent mistrust that is held in this nation, in this state, and in this legislature. This inherent bias that generations have been fighting to dispel. You have birthed a new generation of women and girls who are demanding that we are seen as equal. And that work will not stop after we adjourn this special session. There was a time when our laws were intentionally designed to keep women as less than equal. There was a time when she couldn't open up a bank account without a man. She couldn't be trusted making decisions about her own finances. Only 100 years ago were women guaranteed the right to vote. Before then, women couldn't be trusted by her government to make the right choice about who should represent her. She didn't have a voice or a say in how laws were created or in who ran her government. There was a time when women were banned from holding certain jobs. Surely government couldn't let a woman work in any field of their choosing, right? There were once laws that prohibited women from divorcing her spouse, and those varied state by state. Some women had to wait or prove that she was physically abused by her spouse before she could divorce him. And some states banned divorce altogether. There was a time when women couldn't be active members in the military, when women didn't get paid at all for work. In Indiana today, women face one of the largest gender pay gaps in the nation. She only makes 72 cents for every dollar a man makes, regardless of his qualifications. Bills have been introduced by both House and Senate Democrats to close Indiana's gender wage gap. And I would appreciate your support on that in the future. There was a time in this country when women couldn't marry and keep their maiden name, and if she did, her pay could have been withheld or her right to vote denied. The last state to remove this law from the books was 1976. A married woman couldn't own property. There was a time when women endured unregulated work hours. The first law that required women could not be forced to work more than 10 hours a day. Not because it was unfair, but because it interfered with her maternal duties and was seen as unsafe. Now, that might have been the first pregnancy accommodation law in the books, but boy, did they fight back hard against it, all the way to the Supreme Court, finally being upheld in 1908. There was a time when government even thought banning women from wearing pants was a good idea. You see, our nation's history is relevant. It reveals some of the inequities that linger today and help us understand how we got here. Our history reveals a time when women didn't have access to or were denied accurate information on birth control. Just yesterday, Representative Fleming's amendment to allow pharmacists the ability to distribute the pill and the patch was denied. Women in Indiana still do not have the same access that 24 other states provide women. There was a time when this General Assembly wasn't just 70% male, it was 100% male. Just take a look at some of these photos in the hallway hanging here. It may not seem strange to all of you, but it's for that very reason that women did not have the same rights as those who were sitting in these seats writing the laws. Women weren't here to stand up for themselves and each other. They weren't here to stand at this podium and demand equal rights under the law. They didn't have a seat at the table. And as the late Representative Bill Crawford used to say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. But now, women can hold office. She can even be vice president. And I hope you tell your daughters that. And I'm here to remind this body that the House Democrats have a majority female caucus by just one member. And we are prepared to stand up for our equal rights, not just today, but every day thereafter until we are seen as equal by the state. We have come a long way as women, but as of this moment right now, women in Indiana still have the freedom of choice. And I am here asking you to not roll back the clock on Hoosier women. The nation is watching. Women are watching. With this policy in place, we will continue to struggle to attract people to our state. Our medical community will struggle to fill desperately needed positions to care for your loved ones and for the majority of Hoosiers who will be facing aging out into 65 and older and will need more care. Our rural communities already lack access to care, with maternity care deserts in 33 of our 92 counties, and doctors testifying in this room that they will leave the state should a ban become law in Indiana. Removing licensing requirements and lowering standards cannot be the answer to filling job vacancies in our state. All the while, this body continues to pass policies like this that gain us national attention for the poor treatment of women and families, the LGBTQ community, and people of different faith from yours. Our universities will struggle to appeal to younger generations, impacting our enrollment. How do we guarantee safe campuses if we deny a woman's medical freedom in that short time when she's studying here? It is already happening. The laws that we pass out of this chamber create the results that we see. Now, you can get up to the pulpit all you want on Sunday morning and preach the Bible, but in here, we aren't writing scripture, we're writing the law. And here, we are lawmakers. And it is our responsibility to never stop working to ensure that our laws reflect that men and women were created equal, and that we defend and declare our universal human rights bestowed to us by virtue of being human to freedom, equality, and dignity. Forced birth is not freedom. Forcing government to decide women's healthcare decisions, but not a man's, is not equal. Forcing a survivor of rape to give birth to her abuser's child is not dignity. Government's role is to ensure we are providing access to quality and essential healthcare services, especially to the vulnerable. Government's role has not been and should not start in interfering with the patient-doctor relationship. No law should compromise a physician's ability to use good faith medical judgment when caring for a patient. A law based exclusively on the person's personal religious views of the party and the majority that ignores what the medical community is telling us is downright dangerous. It will do harm. The freedom to choose is granted by this very body to receive a vaccine or claim religious exemption. But that same freedom proposed by Representative Johnson's amendment for women's reproductive rights was voted down yesterday. Both are health care, but only one decision impacts a woman. The same cries demanding medical freedom and body autonomy from a vaccine have suddenly gone silent. Women want the same freedoms you have. Isn't a woman worth fighting for? The Senate author called this bill the most intimate of issues. When did the Republican Party take up legislating individuals' most intimate of issues? Amendments proposed by House Democrats denied because it would impose too much of a burden on business. Unpaid bereavement leave to mourn the loss of a child, accommodations for pregnant women so they can safely bring their child to full term over and over again. This legislature fails to stop the rapist and fails to prevent unwanted pregnancy. This year we passed a law that addressed coerced abortion, but turned a blind eye to the sexual and reproductive coercion that will continue to put young girls and women in these horrible situations. Please, House sponsors of this bill, we have to address that in January. Now, I'll continue to believe that you can maintain your personal beliefs while also being a legislator. But seeing personal beliefs getting in the way of allowing the support of survivors of rape and incest is just dangerous. Or using as a justification to roll back the rights of women and girls in this state, sending us back to the laws of the 1950s. That is dangerous. When you see a crowd of Hoosiers like that we have seen in the halls of the People's House, you listen. No new law should create that kind of reaction from your constituents. It's simply proof that this is a bad bill. This legislature still has a lot of work to do to ensure that women are even safe to give birth in the state of Indiana. Based on our infant mortality rate, we have a lot of work to do to ensure children will actually live to see their first birthday. Getting pregnant in Indiana shouldn't be a death sentence. It is statistically more dangerous to be pregnant in Indiana than 47 other states in America. We have women dying in childbirth and pregnancy now, before this law is passed, which is intended to restrict her access to health care that could save her life. If you don't understand what a woman may need during childbearing years, you can ask one. She needs to have options to access affordable contraceptives. She needs support both when she is trying to get pregnant and when she is trying not to get pregnant. She needs access to a hospital or OB services that doesn't require driving to the next county. She needs accurate prenatal care in the first trimester that provides medical information, not just ultrasounds and counseling. She should feel comfort knowing that if she ends up being the 1 in 4 pregnancies that ends in a miscarriage, or if pregnancy complications occur, that she will be able to discuss safe and legal healthcare options with her doctor. And she needs to know that her government will not force her into being a mother. Survivors of rape and incest will have more rights today than if this bill should pass. This bill arbitrarily chooses 10 weeks for the government to strip before the government strips away a survivor's decision-making power. A no vote on this bill is a bill to allow those survivors to maintain some individual decision-making power after losing a feeling of control in their lives. A woman today can decide the number of kids she wants to have, but today, and only because she lives in Indiana, you want to take that decision-making power away. Government will tell women how many children they can have because and only because you believe you are better fit to make that decision than her, more trustworthy. The truth is you are only more powerful. Government passing policy that forces a child victim of rape to be a mother before she can even graduate high school or even elementary school? I never thought I'd see the day. We should instead be putting in place policies that incentivize healthy pregnancies and healthy children, not putting in place a policy that forces victims of rape to give birth. Policies that support the child, mother, and family, like paid family leave for new parents, which the state has repeatedly failed to do because of the burden on the business. We don't even guarantee paid maternity leave for every mother who just gave birth. No guarantee that you will get the time off to heal, to bond, to adjust. If you haven't noticed, women are angry. Men who love a woman are angry. And I hope you understand why. Telling them that you are more qualified to make her medical decisions insults her and demeans her. Women in Indiana will be less protected with this new law, which tells women, should you become the victim of rape or incest and you live in Indiana, you shall, enforced by the law, mandated by the state, dictated by your state government, carry your abuser's child to full term and give birth to that child. Members of the House, your definition of incest doesn't even include cousin. And I want to be clear, I believe a man raping a child is not the work of God. It's the work of the devil. A child being raped is not God's plan. Please think of the women and young girls in your district and let her own faith guide that decision, not yours. This bill is so extreme, it further drives the divide that has grown so deep across our nation, where the quality of life and individual rights and freedoms granted to people differ on a state-by-state basis. I urge you to lead with the public's best interest, not with your political might of a supermajority. You can't keep passing laws and policies that go against the will of the majority of the people with the message, if you don't like it, get out, because they're leaving. And for those of you that represent one of those 33 counties without a hospital or OB services, that's where women will be impacted the most. And women of color and women in rural Indiana face higher rates of infant and maternal mortality and morbidity. And across the country, maternal mortality is on the rise. While other countries across the globe are securing these rights, achieving monumental gains with nearly 50 countries reforming their abortion laws, in this nation, with the highest maternal mortality rate than any other developed country, the U.S. has become one of only 4 nations in the world to remove protections for a safe and legal abortion. And Indiana is leading the way among states with the 3rd highest maternal mortality rate. As women across the world are gaining access to safe and legal abortion, overturning absolute bans in favor of women's reproductive autonomy. It wasn't until this year that Indiana finally banned the shackling of incarcerated pregnant women, an inhumane act that was long overdue. It was only until this year that we expanded Medicaid coverage for pregnant women, proven to save lives of postpartum mothers. Indiana is going to force women and girls to give birth when 50% of our state is a child care desert. Forced birth in the only wealthy nation that does not provide paid family medical leave. Forced birth in a nation where Black moms face higher rates of death from pregnancy and childbirth. Forced birth where we average 1 mass shooting per day and have no universal health care or universal child care. Help the people understand why you listen to faith leaders to guide you on the issue of abortion, but when they testify before this body, as they did, asking us to protect our state's wetlands, because they believed, as they said, all life is sacred, and we should protect that life and their habitat. The supermajority didn't listen. When the faith community came out and testified before this body, as they did, in opposition to permitless carry, stating firmly that it should be defeated, saying, and I quote, "The respect for the dignity of human life and moral responsibility will be further eroded." The supermajority did not listen. When faith organizations asked us to pass the long overdue update of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, which provides state assistance to families in dire economic circumstances, which have not been adjusted for inflation since 1988, and maxes out monthly cash payments at $288 for a family of 3, the supermajority, again, did not listen. And I have bore witness to all 3 of these issues being turned down by the supermajority in the past 2 years, despite the faith community's input. So you see, I have a difficulty understanding when it's okay to choose to defend a political position based on faith only when it's convenient or suits a party's political agenda. Above all, I wish we heard more from public officials in this chamber and across the hall declaring their faith in the people they serve, their unwavering beliefs in women and girls, and recognizing her God-given ability to exercise free will, and affirm that you will not infringe on her right to pursue life and liberty, and declare her free from government overreach. And I'm grateful to the leaders who, despite their own personal religious beliefs, do not impose them on the people they serve. And I'm grateful to those who support a woman's right to choose, not despite of their faith, but because of it. Those who fear the judgment of the people who sent you here. And I'm left with little faith when pastors defend no exemption for victims of rape and incest. The same pastors who mentor our children should know that no child under the age of 16 legally consented, and no child survivor of rape should ever be forced to give birth. You represent the survivor too. Be her voice too. We should all want to protect child victims of sexual assault, those babies, from the adult they thought they could trust. It is now up to this body to prove that they trust women, believe in women, trust that she doesn't need you at her hospital bed to make these decisions for her. Believe that women are also smart enough to make this decision. And I've never been more convinced that this body was not prepared to pass a piece of legislation. This bill should not move forward. It was not well-intentioned. It is not well thought out. We heard from that it will cause further harm to women in the military who face more child loss and more sexual assault than the general public. It provides more protections for the rapist than the rape. And it's young girls, the victim, those who don't have the family support or who live with their abuser, who will face the greatest harm from the passage of this bill. A vote for this bill is a vote to increase our maternal mortality rate in this state, a vote to increase our infant mortality rate, more infants dying before their first birthday. Our stats will rise, despite the hard work that so many have put in to reduce these rates in coordination with the medical community. In 2020, my county of St. Joseph, the infant mortality rate was the lowest they had seen in decades. We have seen our infant mortality teen pregnancy rates decrease. Upon passage of this bill, these numbers will go up, impacting women, children, and families immediately. Because this bill is not following the advice of the medical community and health officials whose life work has been dedicated to these missions, the work that's truly pro-life. You heard testimony from women reliving one of the most difficult and scarring moments of their lives, all to help you be better informed in your decision-making on this issue. To pass a law that best helps and protects other victims, to help the next victim remain in control of their future. Deciding to grow or start a family should be an exciting time in a woman's life. We should empower women. Having a baby should remain her decision. So standing before this legislative body, using my voice for those who cannot, speaking for women of childbearing age who feel silenced, the women you walk past in those halls and don't make eye contact with. Your vote today will change the trajectory of all girls and women of childbearing age in this state, whether you choose to understand the impact of your decision here today or not. I will be casting my no vote for my district and those who I represent for the young victim who will have less protections from the rapist than she has today at this very moment. For the mother who fought for this right years ago and is no longer of childbearing age, but wants her daughters to have the same freedom of choice about when and how she gets pregnant. For the husband who's motivated solely by the love he has for a woman, his respect for her, and his trust for her. To the fathers of daughters, including a few state senators in the chamber across the way, who voted no for their daughters, who understood that the power they have today is finite, who understood their futures will never be impacted by the decision made here today, but their childbearing daughters will, who voted for her to maintain the rights she has today in the state of Indiana. I stand with the majority of Hoosiers who overwhelmingly oppose this extreme abortion ban bill and will be voting no. You can try to take us back in time to a time that we only read about in history books, but we will rise back up, and I ask you to join us in the fight for our lives. Thank you.
For discussion on the bill, no applause, no applause.